Why, hello YouTube. Alright, I thought I'd talk about operating systems yet again. And what do I think about them in general? What do I think about each of the operating systems? Well, first we'll start with Windows. Windows is a good operating system to use. Now, to work with, it's a bit of a clusterfuck in my opinion. As far as tweaking and getting things to work and even repair. Especially repairing when the Windows operating system is extremely, in my opinion. You can do it. It just seems like a bit of a clusterfuck and complete disorganization to me. Now, that being said, it's a great operating system to use, but it's not a great operating system to work with as far as the OS itself goes. Now, working with it does not mean using software with it. That's still using a computer rather than working with it. Now, as far as Mac OS X, Linux, and Unix go, Unix such as BSD, which Mac OS X is actually based off of, so they kind of all fall into the same family, in my opinion. Those operating systems are much more easy to work with, in my opinion, especially Linux and Mac OS X. Now, Mac OS X has mastered the process of installing software, period. I mean, literally, you download something, you drag the icon into the applications folder, and it's installed. Done. No one I've seen out there has devised a better system than that. Period. Installing stuff in BSD, Unix, and Linux is pretty similar. You basically install packages or you build stuff from source. Now, the way that works is a little bit more involved to the user, but as far as an operating system itself goes, it's a little bit more organized, I think. Having a packaging system or just building the applications from the source every time. Now, you can do the same in Mac OS X. You can build applications from source and run them on Mac OS X because it's running Unix. And, there you have it. I mean, I don't know. Operating systems, it's a very, very... There's a whole bunch of subtleties and specifics when someone would choose an operating system. For example, for me, right now, when just using a computer in general, for me right now, at least just using a computer in general, I've been using Windows lately, at least on my PCs and my netbook even. But over here on the server, I've been using... whoa, nearly tripped over Adele there. On the server, I've been using Linux, and Linux has just been running. And that's what works for me. It really all depends what works for you. You got to ask yourself when choosing, what advantage do you get out of one operating system over another? The whole fanboy thing is crap, is absolute crap. It just completely degrades the point of the fact that there is more than one operating system for a computer. It completely destroys the whole point of that. The reason there are different operating systems is because number one, it gives you choice. Number two, it gives you versatility. And number three, it gives you the best tool for the job. And I think the third reason is the most important of any of them, the best tool for the job, which gets the job done the fastest, the most accurately, and causes the least amount of issues. Sometimes that's Windows. Sometimes that's Mac OS X, Unix, BSD, one of the Unixes. Sometimes it's Linux. It all depends. There are just very specific scenarios in how you could put these things to use. It really depends on what you're doing with your computer. There are too many specifics to really give you a clear-cut answer to each one, but I can give you some pretty general answers. If you're just a general computer user, all you do is maybe you're a gamer, or all you do is surf the web, maybe mod in some games, do some mods and stuff. Windows is perfectly fine. Perfect, for basic use. Windows is also good if you're a developer, because Windows is a development playground. There's so much development going on in Windows that it's excellent for that. And the same goes for Linux right now, actually, because there's a lot of development going on both the Windows and the Linux side. And, you know, it's probably been there all along, but now we're only really just taking wind of it. As far as Linux goes, Linux is kind of like that close-knit community that has its fights and its rivalries and its little quabbles within, but in the end, you still end up with good software. And, I mean, Ubuntu, for example. Ubuntu first came out in 2004, late 2004. Now it's grown to be a leader in Linux operating systems. This is why I like the Linux world so much. You can go from nothing to the king, just like Ubuntu did. You can go from absolutely nothing to the king. And in a way, that's what Apple also did back in the 70s with the Apple II. I still think the Apple II is the best computer that Apple's ever produced. It's lasted forever. Yeah. Macintosh is not far behind that because it jump-started GUI for the home user on a computer. But I digress. Anyway, if you're a person who does a lot of multimedia, such as video editing, photo editing, let's say you do a bunch of Photoshop stuff, graphic design, Windows or Mac OS X will work just fine. Both will work perfectly for that because you can get, in a lot of cases, you can get the same software for both platforms. It just depends which you like working with better, whether you prefer Mac OS X or Windows at that point. It's both. Like, for example, if you use the Adobe suites to do everything, you could choose Mac OS X or Windows and be happy with either one because the software is available on both. And that's a benefit. That's a real benefit. Because if you, me for example, I don't like some of the tools that come with Windows for video editing, but I do like some of the Adobe stuff. I would be happy putting Adobe on a Mac and working with iMovie 06 and GarageBand along with some of the Adobe stuff. Now there are some things in Windows that I do like, such as Sony Vegas 7. Sony Vegas is one of the best video editors out there. You could use the Adobe products in conjunction with that as well. So you can have different combinations of software with different operating systems, giving you what you want. I mean, there you go. As far as multimedia on Linux goes, it's kind of in its infancy at this point. I mean, you can do some pretty cool stuff, but the software is a little bit archaic to use. The best video editor they have right now on the Linux platform is Kdenlive, and it's not even at a 1.0 yet. It's still pretty buggy, but it's still a productive piece of software that you can use to edit videos. And the thing about Linux you got to remember is that people are paid to develop stuff on Linux. Some people do it on their own free time because they want this piece of software written, but other people actually are paid to develop. You know, it's just not always corporate, and sometimes it's just like three guys that want to build a program, and one guy gets a hold of a couple of programmers and they develop a program, and then they try to make use of it. As far as the BSD, as far as the usefulness of Linux goes, I've had the most use of it as a lightweight desktop operating system, especially on older computers, such as Pentium 4s, Pentium 3s, AMD Athlon XPs. It runs great on Athlon XPs, really well actually. And the best use I've had out of it thus far, has been on a server, though. Linux is one of the best server operating systems out there. You cannot go wrong with it on there. And the reason for that is because there are many different flavors or distributions of Linux. So if one doesn't work for you, you can try another. I use Debian on my servers. Some people use Ubuntu server, which is a derivative of Debian, so essentially, it's the same thing, but the software for the multimedia stuff, like MythTV, which is, like DVR type of program, is a little bit more up-to-date on Ubuntu than it is on Debian, mainly because the repos are a little bit more up-to-date in Ubuntu. So it all depends what you're doing, but I'm using this server for files, game servers, and you don't need the most up-to-date software to do that. You just don't. And Debian tests the hell out of their software before putting it up in the repos, so it's a pretty safe bet in my opinion. Now, the usefulness of Mac OS X for me would be mostly the fact that of the iLife stuff, mostly GarageBand more than anything else actually, because I've tried doing keyboard synthesis and MIDI stuff on Linux, but Linux has a history of having not the greatest performance when using MIDI voices, and just MIDI in general has been a problem in Linux forever. I mean, it works, but you have to have a beefy computer and a very stable operating system to have it be stable, which, you know, I'm fine with that. But you take a look at Mac OS X, which is, you know, Darwin, which is built on top of Darwin Unix, which is a BSD, and the MIDI working in that is beautiful. That's why I love GarageBand, because you can do a lot of MIDI stuff in there, and without a hitch, you can record it in that. You can mix it around with some of the programs in there. And the main reason I like Mac OS X so much is Logic Pro. Logic, one of the best audio production programs ever written. Absolutely amazing. And there's some that are pretty good on Linux as well, such as Our Door. Our Door is one of my favorites on Linux. Linux Multimedia Studio is another good one. On Windows, the equivalent to a lot of those is FL Studio, which is also a pretty good program. It all depends on what you like, honestly. As far as the usefulness of Windows goes, I use Windows for everyday computing, more gaming than the usefulness of it for me strives for gaming more than anything else. And in general, Windows 7 for me has been a great operating system. I haven't really had too many quabbles about it that would want me to just stop using it altogether. It works. It works. That's the thing about it. And, you know, I mean, the other use I have for Windows is iTunes, unfortunately, because I've used iTunes since version 1.1. You know, I'm kind of set in my ways as far as that's concerned. I might have to change at some point, but right now, I don't want to. Now, let's go to the usefulness of BSD and other forms of Unix. Now, there's quite a popular distribution of Unix out there called FreeBSD. And there's FreeBSD and NetBSD, which are the two that I think are the best out there so far. FreeBSD runs... Well, let me put it this way. Half the web servers on the internet are run by FreeBSD and Linux. And FreeBSD is a stable platform. It's very stable, actually. It's great for running web servers with Apache, PHP, etc., etc. And it's very secure. That's the main reason that a lot of the web servers use it, is that it's very, very secure. And that has a good use. I mean, I've seen projects like PCBSD where they try to bring BSD to the desktop. I think it has potential to be on the desktop. I mean, we already have BSD on the desktop. That's what Mac OS X is. But they're trying to make it sort of the same concept as Linux is, where they take an operating system that was started out as nothing and turn it into a desktop operating system so that you can run stuff. Now, that I could see being great for developers, but for the average everyday person, I think Linux is a little better, going by the same concept. And for everybody else, I think Windows and Mac OS X are just fine, you know, because both Windows and Mac OS X are pretty no-frills operating systems where you just install something and it works. You don't have to tweak it to get it to work. You just use it. Well, although with Linux, that's starting to change. A lot of Linux distributions are starting to head in the direction stuff that just works, such as Ubuntu and Linux Mint, for example. Now, I've described computers like this in the past. Windows is for someone who has used computers for a while, or has used Windows for a while, and really knows what they're doing on a computer, and wants to be very productive at what they're doing. Now, the same could be true for Linux, but this is how I think of it. Mac OS X is an operating system for people who hate computers and just want things to just work and get things done and get on the damn internet. I think Linux is for people who, it's great for people who are on a budget, or if you have an old machine lying around that you want to make use of, Linux is perfect for that. BSD, I'd leave BSD to the administrators if I were you. BSD, in my opinion, is going to be a server operating system for a long time. It may become a desktop operating system, other than Mac OS X, I mean. It might become a desktop operating system at some point. I don't have my hopes extremely high for that, but I'm not doubting anything. It could happen. You never know. And I hope this opens up a dialogue, a discussion, and hope to hear what you guys have to think about operating systems. Now, that was a long talk I had about them, so I think I'll end it here. So, have a good one, everybody.